"You're out, Alex. The board voted this morning. It's a clean break." Mark looked at me across the polished glass table, his expression completely devoid of emotion. His eyes, usually alive and full of feigned enthusiasm, were cold and lifeless, like two reset buttons. He spoke those 6 words that felt like a sledgehammer hitting my chest, ending 20 years of friendship and 5 years of relentless work. The physical shock was immense, a sudden coldness that spread from my core, accompanied by a ringing in my ears and the feeling that the floor was dropping out from under me. In that moment, the friendship I idealized died, replaced by the crushing realization that the betrayal wasn't a sudden fit of greed. It was a carefully plotted, methodical execution that had been underway for months. It wasn't a flash of rage, but a pre-composed, multi-layered contract for destruction. But even as the blood drained from my face, a cold, hard determination solidified in my mind. My pain seemed to transform into liquid nitrogen, freezing emotions and activating pure, unbiased thinking. My immediate reaction wasn't sorrow, but a profound analytical clarity. I instantly began reviewing every decision and document from the last 6 months, searching for a logical error in his seemingly perfect plan. 6 months after that betrayal, Mark was standing in front of federal investigators, his phone flashing with news of the company's collapse. The empire he built on my trust crumbled in a single, humiliating public moment. I was across town, watching a sunset I hadn't seen in years, feeling a profound sense of quiet relief. It wasn't the victor's exultation, but the engineer's sense of completed duty. It was the satisfaction of mathematical closure, of a moral equation finally balanced. My name is Alex Sterling. I'm 35, and I used to believe that professional partnerships could truly be friendships. I learned that for some people, friendship is just a carefully calculated overhead cost in their pursuit of greed. This is the story of how my closest friend stole my intellectual property and my future, and how I used a legal loophole in my own code to deliver a perfectly deserved consequence. Mark Jensen and I were inseparable since high school. We met in sophomore year shop class, arguing over the optimal resistance for a circuit board. He was the visionary, the smooth-talking guy who could sell air conditioning to an Eskimo. Mark excelled in performance, in presentations, negotiations, and social engineering. But beneath his polished exterior, I sensed a smoldering envy for my quiet ability to create tangible, complex things that existed purely because of my engineering, independent of his charm. His envy wasn't aimed at money. It was aimed at the ownership of genuine, uncopyable skill. He could sell my technology, but he could never build it. This created a deep, pathological inferiority complex that he masked with arrogance. I was the architect, the quiet coder who could build the engine Mark promised. I found satisfaction in the elegant logic of a well-optimized system. For me, code was pure art, free from market hustle. We balanced each other perfectly. Mark handled the noise, PR, sales, meetings. I handled the substance, products, architecture, data. After college, while Mark chased investment banking jobs, I stayed focused on artificial intelligence and predictive modeling. I always knew our paths would converge again, and they did 5 years ago. I had built Nexus, an advanced algorithm that could predict supply chain failures with 98% accuracy. It was a quantum leap in forecasting, using chaos theory and deep reinforcement learning. Its value wasn't in the database, but in its mathematical structure. The Nexus algorithm functioned as a self-learning agent that didn't just analyze historical data, but modeled millions of possible failures in real time. This allowed it to predict black swans, sudden, catastrophic events in global logistics, weeks before they became obvious. This level of preemptive analysis made us unique and was worth every penny of the claimed $80 million valuation. It was my baby, built on sleepless nights fueled by caffeine and pure belief. Mark saw the dollar signs immediately. He convinced me to launch a startup with him. "This changes the world, Alex. We'll be billionaires, but more importantly, we'll build a legacy," he promised. We named the company Nexus Technologies. Mark became CEO, and I was CTO. We shook hands not just as partners, but as brothers united by a shared dream. For the first 4 years, it was pure grind. I worked relentlessly, often sleeping in my office chair. Mark was the face, securing our seed funding and charming early clients. He was a master of impression, of creating the noise investors loved. We were a team. I trusted him implicitly, almost worshipped his ability to navigate the cutthroat world of venture capital. I covered for his weaknesses, which were mostly financial. Mark lived large, always pushing the limits of his expense account. He upgraded his wardrobe from sharp suits to custom bespoke tailoring and leased a new penthouse. He often seemed detached from the daily realities of development, Preoccupied instead with extravagant lifestyle expenses, he required constant external validation. Physical proof of success, while I was satisfied with a stable Git commit. He spent money on flashy watches, elite cars, and private clubs, substituting real success with a mirage of well-being. Once he needed a large personal loan to cover a questionable crypto investment that had failed spectacularly. The amount was 6 figures, and I signed the guarantee without a second thought, seeing it as a necessary favor for my partner. He presented it as a temporary liquidity crisis, not reckless speculation, and I, prioritizing loyalty over prudence, signed the documents that linked me to his failure. His desperation to quickly settle the debt made him vulnerable to the Vanguard offer, as I now understand. "We're family, Alex. It's just moving money from one pocket to another," he said. And I believed him. The first small crack appeared during our Series B funding round. A new clause was slipped into the operating agreement, shifting my equity from common shares to preferred, non-voting stock. This move effectively neutered my power in any corporate decision. He convinced me that investors required a clean line of management, and that my voice on the board would just get in the way of our rapid growth. In effect, this amendment removed my ability to vote against the intellectual property sale he was already planning. Mark explained it away as investor requirements, to keep his control as CEO stable. "It's a temporary measure, buddy. Once we IPO, we'll clean it up. Don't worry about the noise," he assured me. I swallowed my legal instincts. I saw the logic of keeping a unified front for the investors, suppressing the feeling of unease that this clause was designed entirely to disempower the creator of the core product. The bigger alarm came 2 months later in the form of a strange invoice. It was a payment for a third-party audit of the Nexus codebase, specifically the core Nexus algorithm. I asked Mark about it. He claimed it was standard due diligence for a potential government contract. "They want to ensure the IP is clean, Alex. It's a huge opportunity. Don't mess it up by being suspicious," he snapped. His tone was sharp, his mask slipping for the briefest moment, revealing a flash of genuine impatience and hostility. It was a cold warning that I was asking too many questions. A true audit would have included my involvement, checking code comments, and a personal interview. Instead, they requested a complete, uncommented snapshot of the repository. It was a request for theft, masked as a legal procedure. I dismissed it. I had built the code. My name was on every line. What could a third-party audit possibly find? I told myself Mark was just stressed. I trusted the man. That was my single, catastrophic mistake. The day I found out was the day I was expelled from my own company. The board meeting was short and brutal. Mark read a pre-written statement about strategic realignment and redundancy in core development. The investors, most of whom I had never met, nodded robotically. They didn't even look me in the eye. The worst part was the realization that I wasn't even worth an honest explanation. I was merely a disposable line item in an investor presentation. I was reduced to an excess asset that could be written off. I felt less anger than a deep, philosophical contempt for their short-sightedness. "You're out, Alex. Here's a severance package and an NDA. Your services are no longer required." I was escorted out of the building I had helped build, the one that still smelled faintly of my stale coffee and late-night pizza. The security guard, a burly guy named Dave, avoided my gaze. He knew something was wrong. This was the last human interaction I received from Nexus Technologies. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I didn't even yell at Mark as the security guard led me past his office door. The rage was immediate, volcanic, but it was instantaneously channeled into an icy, analytical focus. I went straight to my small, empty apartment. I didn't call a lawyer immediately. My first move had to be forensic. Instead, I opened my personal development environment and accessed the Nexus codebase from my backup drive. I had a hidden, low-privilege backup account I left for emergency service in case the servers went down. Mark, focused on deleting my primary CTO account, missed this low-level ghost access. I knew that the redundancy was a lie. Nexus was the company. My suspicion centered on that strange third-party audit invoice from months ago. Using my developer access, which Mark hadn't revoked immediately, I pulled the network logs from the day of the alleged audit. The audit wasn't an audit. It was a complete, unauthorized transfer of the entire Nexus algorithm. The logs revealed the data was transferred in 4 distinct, encrypted phases over a 72-hour period, a methodical approach designed to mimic routine large-scale cloud synchronization. The payload consisted of the model's core weights, proprietary feature engineering libraries, and a compiled runtime executable totaling over 150 GB, the entire technological core. Mark deliberately split the transfer into 4 parts to avoid triggering security thresholds set to detect single-moment anomalous traffic spikes. He thought like a criminal, not a CTO. The data wasn't sent to a government agency. It was pushed to an encrypted server owned by Vanguard Solutions. Vanguard Solutions was Nexus Tech's biggest competitor, a company Mark publicly mocked and hated. Mark hadn't just fired me, he had sold the entire technological heart of our company for a massive, unholy payout, making me redundant after the asset was gone. I pulled the full corporate filing from the SEC database. It took less than an hour. The truth was laid bare. Vanguard Solutions had acquired Nexus Tech's core intellectual property assets for a reported $80 million. The deal was finalized 1 week before my expulsion. The entire payout went into a newly formed, untraceable offshore trust fund, with Mark Jensen listed as the primary signatory and beneficiary. The trust, registered in the Cayman Islands with 3 layers of shell company ownership, was testament to Mark's meticulous preparation to shield his sudden wealth from both investors and me. He used a complex money laundering scheme to create distance between the IP sale and his personal accounts, confident that he was untouchable. My equity, my preferred, non-voting shares, were rendered immediately worthless by the IP sale. He didn't just break my trust. He calculated the exact maximum value he could steal without violating criminal law, only corporate law. His planning was meticulous, but focused only on the finance side. It was this focus on financial and legal protection, while completely neglecting technical integrity, that became his fatal error. He couldn't imagine that the code he sold was my ally, not just a commodity. I sat in the silence of my apartment, staring at the screen, the details of the betrayal mocking my years of loyalty. I felt a profound, chilling calmness. This wasn't a fight I could win with emotion. This required a complete, meticulous strategic campaign. I decided I would pretend to be broken. I let Mark believe I was defeated. I ignored his patronizing emails about moving on and finding a new path. He sent several emails full of fake sympathy, trying to ensure I wouldn't fight back. I didn't reply to any of them, allowing him to revel in a false sense of security. While Mark celebrated his $80 million windfall, I began building my trap. I was going to leverage his arrogance against him. I knew I couldn't sue him just for corporate misconduct. The contracts protected him. I needed to find the one thing he overlooked, the one legal requirement he, the finance guy, ignored because it seemed insignificant. The core of the Nexus algorithm had a forgotten signature, an architectural requirement I had built in myself. The trap wasn't built in a courtroom, it was built in the code itself. Mark, in his haste to secure the $80 million, had failed to correctly transfer one minor, but critical, piece of ownership. The original Nexus algorithm was registered under an old, individual provisional patent I filed in my name years ago, before the company was even incorporated. This patent covered the fundamental mathematical logic of the predictive model, the core invention itself. I called it the singularity prediction method. This was standard procedure. But Mark never correctly updated the final assignment documents to the corporate entity, Nexus Technologies, likely because his legal team only audited the official corporate IP filings, missing this critical legacy document. He thought the overall corporate structure transfer was sufficient. He was wrong. The $80 million deal was based on the sale of an asset, the IP that Nexus Technologies technically did not fully own, meaning the Vanguard acquisition was fundamentally flawed and based on misrepresentation. This legal flaw turned a contract dispute into a federal financial fraud case. But that wasn't enough to hurt him. I needed a final public humiliation tied to a serious federal charge. I focused on the SEC. Mark was at his peak of arrogance and was about to launch his new Vanguard-backed consulting firm financed by the stolen $80 million. He needed to pitch this new firm to major investors at the prestigious annual tech summit. I contacted a top-tier corporate litigation firm not to sue, but to formally file a complaint with the SEC. The complaint wasn't about the IP theft. It was about insider trading and intentional misrepresentation of corporate assets to secure the $80 million sale. We proved that by selling the IP while knowing about the incomplete transfer of rights, Mark had knowingly inflated Nexus Technologies' value, a direct violation of SEC rules. Mark had misrepresented the full ownership status of the IP in the sale documentation. That was a material financial crime. Simultaneously, I initiated my own technical countermeasure. The architect's protocol, it was protocol under Trier, and it was engineered to be maximally public and irreversible. When I first built Nexus, I embedded 3 lines of code in the core validation loop hidden deep within the license validation library. These 3 lines of code were deceptively simple. They performed a hash check against a decommissioned developer token, my ID. If the hash check failed due to the token's non-existence, the algorithm would issue a specific pre-programmed error and halt execution. Specifically, these 3 lines checked for the presence and validity of a single, unused encryption key tied to my account. When Mark deleted my account, that key vanished from the system registry, and Protocol Lender 3A began its countdown. These lines were a technical fail-safe, a proprietary validation key that would initiate a high-visibility, recursive check if the primary user account on my original developer ID was deleted without a specific manual deactivation code. Mark, focused on corporate papers, had no idea I had left a digital signature in the code that, upon my system deletion, would scream about the violation. Mark had deleted my account, my user ID, the day he fired me, but he had no idea about the technical fail-safe. He wasn't a coder. He missed the one check I wrote myself. The climax was set for the tech summit, Mark's big announcement. He was delivering his keynote speech in a huge auditorium filled with the tech world's elite and major media outlets. The backdrop showed a live, dynamic demo of the Nexus algorithm running on Vanguard's servers, predicting real-time supply chain disruptions. The atmosphere was thick with excitement and Mark's radiating hubris. Mark was beaming, talking about strategic vision and trusting your partners. The irony was staggering. Just as he was reaching the peak of his pitch, the moment of maximum media attention, right as he uttered the word trust, I executed my final command from a coffee shop 3 blocks away. I didn't use a keyboard or a complex script. I simply logged into my low-level Ghost account and sent one single unremarkable data packet that Protocol Lender 3A interpreted as a signal for immediate activation. I triggered the remote deactivation sequence linked to my deleted account. On the massive screen behind Mark, the Nexus algorithm didn't just crash. It initiated the Protocol Lender 3A loop, displaying a repeating error message that explicitly addressed the nature of the crime. A deafening silence fell over the entire auditorium. You could literally hear the distant hum of servers trying, but failing, to recover. The algorithm didn't just stop. It recursively self-destructed, gradually disabling all its modules and logging the reason. The message wasn't technical. It was a single line of text flashing bright red a CCSDNED. IP ODRCPM VerifyED. So Protocol 130A, Mark froze. The investors leaned forward. The screen remained locked on the red, damning error, publicly linking the technology's failure to an ownership dispute. I watched live as a vein pulsed on Mark's temple, the realization of what he missed settling in like cold iron. He tried to laugh it off. Just a small server glitch, folks. We'll fix that right away. But his voice trembled, betraying his panic. His noise failed for the first time. But the glitch didn't stop. It was persistent, embarrassing, and publicly exposed the core product's vulnerability. Then, the true trap sprang. 2 SEC investigators and a uniformed federal marshal walked onto the stage from the side entrance. The timing was synchronized with the on-screen error. The lead investigator pointed directly at Mark, his finger steady. "Mr. Jensen, we are suspending this presentation. We have a sealed warrant related to insider trading and asset misrepresentation in the Nexus Technologies acquisition." Mark's face lost all color. He looked wildly around the room, finally locking eyes with the security detail that was now surrounding him. The ultimate irony, he was arrested right next to the massive screen, still flashing the red IP violation message I wrote. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for Mark. The SEC investigation revealed intentional deception regarding the IP transfer, coupled with stock manipulation charges I had helped the litigators pinpoint. The case was open and shut. The technical failure at the summit served as an undeniable public confession of the underlying legal defect. Mark had his $80 million trust fund frozen, and he faced serious criminal charges. He quickly went from leasing a penthouse to paying for the most expensive defense attorney. He was later convicted and served 3 years in federal prison. The public humiliation of the arrest in the middle of his keynote guaranteed he became a professional pariah, his name forever synonymous with corporate fraud. Worse than the sentence, he lost the one thing he valued: his reputation as a financial genius. Vanguard Solutions, having publicly invested in a flawed and legally tainted asset, immediately sued him for breach of contract and misrepresentation, demanding back the $80 million. Their reputation was also severely damaged. They had to publicly announce the write-off of the asset, which led to a 15% drop in their stock in a single day. My revenge wasn't just against Mark, but against his entire transaction. The Nexus algorithm, the code I poured my life into, was effectively neutralized by my protocol L103A. It was not only disabled, but was also deemed commercially radioactive due to the public ownership dispute and the permanent fear of remote activation, making it toxic and unsaleable. It served as a digital monument to his failure, a piece of technology permanently broken by the breach of trust it embodied. No one in the industry wanted to touch code that everyone now knew could be remotely disabled by its creator with 3 lines of code. I didn't recover all the money, but I did recover the original patent ownership and a significant legal settlement from the dissolution of Nexus Technologies. I walked away from the destruction with my reputation intact and a small, quiet legal settlement. I felt no euphoria watching Mark's downfall, just the sterile satisfaction of seeing a mathematical equation finally balance out, a wrong corrected with logic, not emotion. I used the quiet time and the settlement funds to launch a new, smaller firm focused on ethical and secure data architecture. This new venture was deliberately small, rejecting Mark's scale at all costs philosophy, prioritizing integrity and long-term stability. Our mission statement is simple: code is law, trust is immutable. We guarantee our clients unassailable, transparent ownership and control over their technology. We don't chase venture capital. We seek partners who value durability and ethics over a quick exit. I stopped seeking partners who were good at noise. I now only seek people who value substance and integrity. The betrayal taught me the difference between a brother and a thief, between an asset and a liability. The money Mark stole was finite. The trust he broke was infinite. I rebuilt my life on the cold, hard logic of the code I trusted all along. And now I know a handshake is worthless when the code is the only true witness.